This is Willpower.
Amazing. I'm here on the Willpower podcast with Mr. Josh Trent, just an incredible human and a man of just incredible power. So I'm so thankful to sit down with you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure.
Sweet.
I'm going to open with a quote that came right from you, which is you were on a show recently where you said, make sure you get the wisdom of all of your pain. And you have to sit in that pain for longer and get the wisdom that the pain is trying to teach you. And then when you're honest and you've really gone through it, then you can share it with the world. And so my question is, thus far, what is the biggest pain that you've gone through that's given you the most substantial amount of wisdom?
The intergenerational wounding that I've come to know from my father and my mother. My mom has struggled with manic bipolar for 40 years, 4 decades. My dad left home when I was, I think, 2 months old. The story is unclear, but just very young, basically a little baby. And the strain of conflict between mother and father with deep father wounds, deep mother wounds, took me down a pathway of addiction in pornography and hypersexualizing women. And that took decades for me to heal. But when I really got to the other side of it, I realized that I was just trying to feel safe in my nervous system. And I didn't know how to do that because God loved them. I chose them. My mom with her illness and my dad with his cognitive dissonance just literally did not have the tools.
Yeah.
Not only did they not know how to give me the things that I needed at that age in adolescence and teenagehood and early adulthood, but they didn't even know they didn't know. They had complete unconscious incompetence about it. And I say that with respect and love, right, and compassion. I'm not here to blame my parents. But I think my journey around wisdom is very similar to many people's journey, and that is the initial wound, the mother wound, the father wound. And unraveling that has taken a lot. And, you know, if I'm honest, like the residue of grief and sadness is still there. But the majority of that wound is filled with understanding. It's filled with compassion. Is it 100%? Absolutely not. I'm not going to bullshit you on your podcast.
Yeah,
because
it
we
took
all
time, right? It takes so much time because it's like the earliest origins of the threads of our being. And I just think about how I have connection with so many things in my life that show up as like, you know, the mess that becomes the masterpiece. And I'm like, fuck, there it is again.
Yep.
There's dad. There's his. I laughed because it brought a funny, sweet memory to me, even though you were speaking about finding Playboys, your dad Playboys and things, and how that might have had you lean a bit more into pornography and whatnot. And I was maybe just super innocent kid. My dad had he wore all these colored socks. And so in his colored sock drawer, he sort of had all these Playboys tucked underneath. But I kind of, in my innocence, felt like I knew what they were, but I didn't understand it was like sexual. And I sort of thought, well, he's just using them to keep the socks at the top of the drawer.
Oh,
you know
wow.
what I mean?
That's such an innocent viewpoint.
I know. And I was quite little, but these threads of our parents, the way that they sort of infiltrate us for the rest of our lives. And for me, coming off of a challenging relationship split was the thing that really cracked open the father wound, where I thought, I handled that a long time ago. I handled that when my dad passed. And are there things that you continually are like, oh, let me unpack this new thing that came from my parents all the time?
Healing is a spiral, like to quote Dr. Kelly Brogan, right? There's contraction, expansion. It just keeps happening over and over and over again. And yeah, I would say that when I look at the mother wound, it's just been accepting her wholly and completely for who she is and working through all the expectations that I have as, you know, a man who also, like all of us, has a young version of us inside of us. Yeah. And so learning to parent young Josh and give young Josh what he needs while also giving her compassion as I'm a father to 2 children. I think really like in becoming a father, that's what shifted me the most dramatically to actually learn, to really, really learn, not just intellectually learn, but somatically learn how to be there for myself and give myself what the young Josh in me is crying for in a moment or desiring in a moment.
Right.
Am I perfect? Nope. However, like with doing 10 years of podcasting and 700 episodes, I've gathered a lot and a lot of the wisdom is integrated. There's still much more to go because at some point my parents will die, right? And we all have to accept that. I'm sure there'll be more for me to go through there and whatnot. But yeah, I think becoming a parent really put it into hyperdrive, the healing aspect, because I've healed a lot of my father wound by having a son. Because I tell him like 10 times a day, I love you, I'm kissing him. And it's all real. It's not like there were many times when I was growing up, I felt like my mom's love towards me was kind of an escape from her own pain. And I resented that for a long time. And then when I got to a better place of awareness, I can see always, by the way, that she loved me without condition. I think that's pretty rare, by the way. I didn't know we were going to talk about this, but it's really fascinating. I think the only form of unconditional love that's available on planet Earth is from a mother to a child.
Yeah.
I really do, because the child grows in her. It's a part of her on a cellular level, on an epigenetic level.
Yeah.
And so as men, we have to understand that love actually is conditional for us as men. It really is. It doesn't mean that our value is just our zeros in our bank account or how much we provide. But a man that doesn't provide, a man that's not in his purpose, a man that's not integrated in doing the work and conscious is probably the least attractive person or the least easy to love person for a woman. Don't you agree?
Yeah, yeah. And it's like, there's so much to unpack there. And also the biggest thing for me I get in is when you say that, and this is an interesting perspective because you're in a male body and I'm in a female body, that I think, of course, my mother and I have unconditional love and that is there, but I had the most endearing relationship with my father that felt like special in the nature that he always told me, like, whatever you need to get through, we're going to get through together. Like, silly stuff. Like, you want to smoke pot? Like, we'll go out and find some pot or whatever, right? Like, but simpler things than that. And in a way, turned me into a person who was like, hey, what I'm looking for in a life partner is probably this person who's just going to unconditionally love me no matter what the things are I'm going through and show up in a way that this is the whole, like, this is like Oedipal complex or all the things we talk about in that psychology, but it's looking for that subconsciously in a partner and not actually looking for a person who's like going to show up and have their own things too and their own baggage too. Because a parental, like your parental unit shows up, I think more often than not, with all this unconditional ability.
Sure.
Because it's a child-parent relationship. So I just curious that you say that. And yes, I agree so much with that in many ways. And also because of the relationship I was like blessed with my dad, I think, well, he didn't birth me, but my father said stuff to me when I was like 10 or 11 years old. Like, I think the most beautiful thing in the world is like childbirth. And if there was automatically like a switch where all men were allowed to give birth, I'd be the first one to sign up.
Wow.
And I think that was like pretty evolved, even though my dad was certainly not perfect, pretty evolved coming from, like a male figure in my life since I can remember, like being that kind of open-minded or that, he wasn't like a Texas truck driver. So
yeah. Wow. You sounds like you had a real diamond in the rough of a dad.
Yeah.
And the cool thing about that is like, wow, it probably has shaped in many ways, consciously and unconsciously, the partners that you chose.
For
but
sure.
then, there's just like the spiral of healing is contraction and expansion. So is relationship and selecting partners. So you may consciously think that you're selecting a partner that's for your highest good, but unconsciously, you're probably picking a partner that's going to push all your buttons, make you feel like you did when you were a kid.
Isn't that what we do?
And make you feel like you're not unconditionally loved so that you can go through the journey of actually giving it to yourself and then showing up for that person who hopefully is on the same journey as you.
Yeah.
And then if they're not, you probably won't make it.
I know, like everybody needs to come and get coached by you. You just fucking landed that like a hammer on a nail. That's really, I think, what's happening. And
That's what we're all working through.
Like we meet these people and then they push our buttons and that's the beauty of it, right? We're like chasing the thing that we think we want. And then actually we're just like chasing ourselves to get into wholeness.
I mean, look at the people that come to your retreats. They're dealing with some type of multiple lowercase t trauma or big capital T trauma that, metastasize or amalgamates over time. And then they get to a place where they're like, I really need to reset. I really need to reset my nervous system, my neurology, my psychology, my biology, like all the ologies. I just need like a big reset button. And it's because our body is like, all the books in the studio here, our body is a library just like these books, but it's alive. It's this living library. And so we have all these pages that we think isn't stored yet. It's all stored in there and it's all operating at times where we don't even know that we don't know it's operating. It's kind of like in NLP, and maybe we even chat about this before in person. We only can process, I think it's 256 bits of information per second, yet there's 11 million bits coming in.
Yeah. 200, every 200 milliseconds, there is an environmental stimulus that the nervous system is like, what was that?
yeah, we're just constantly attuning.
Yeah.
So anyways, it's all getting stored somewhere.
Yeah.
And so to the degree that we have a process or processes of off-gassing, much like animals do when they're in nature, when a deer gets chased by a tiger, it literally shakes and it shakes off the trauma.
Yeah.
And then it goes back and eats a flower, but we have like lost the
We're, like,
art of doing that.
It. Yeah.
And so we find it in breathwork and in conversation or in ceremony or in running or laughing or dancing. I mean, there's probably hundreds of ways we can off-gas.
Yeah.
But I just find like, we're either like a river that's flowing or we're a freaking dam, and all the wood and all the chunks, the emotions get stuck there. And sometimes, by the way, too, Kristen, we also get it epigenetically transferred from our lineage, whether it's our great-greats, like my great-great-grandparents came to in New York, Ellis Island, and they were stamped and chose their name. And my grandpa was really poor. And so all that's within us too. I wish it was really simple and we could just be like, do these 3 things and you'll be great. Life isn't like that. The way that our creator designed life is really complex.
Yeah.
And so I think the way that we can really live well, since we're on the Well Power podcast, is like, if we really want to live well, then we have to learn how to be powerful. But I've learned that power really only comes from peace.
Yeah.
You can't have power from force. It just doesn't work. I mean, it works for a while, but it comes at a cost.
Yeah. And I love that we talked about that when I was on your show, and you talked about the elimination of the word force from some of the business model, because it felt like spending a lot of time forcing things to happen. And sometimes you can actually make them work, but they're really not for you.
Yeah.
So interesting.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the stuckness that either show up on my retreats or the people that you're working with or the people that are listening to the show, the older that I get, the more that I think I'm not going to have limiting beliefs, and I have an abundance mindset and all of these things. And the more that I unpack my human, the more I see like, oh, there's a little of that hiding over there and a little of this hiding over there. And I think it'd be really nice to hear you speak about, overcoming limiting beliefs, because I see you do that all the time, like in real time and in life, and listening to your show and just in general, like sitting around a dinner table, you're sort of like working on that and in a way that has a high level of understanding. And so if people are listening to this and us talk and thinking, well, these 10 things are going right, but these 2 things are just holding me back, or discovering what those holdbacks are, like where do people need to start with that, do you think?
I love frameworks because, look, caveat, I love flexible frameworks, because if a framework is too rigid, then it can break under load. Mm-hmm. And so any framework that someone says, this is the only way to do it, don't follow that person. Mm-hmm. So I'll present a framework that I like, that I use, that works for me. And I really feel like it's from probably some of the biggest minds, brightest minds in behavior change, like BJ Fogg and Charles Duhigg and Nir Eyal. And it's the BTFA loop. Mm-hmm. And I believe that if you really break down all of our actions, all the things that we physically do or how we behave, they all center back to a belief, which is the B, the thought, and then we attach emotion, or F, feeling to it. It's like Dispenza, says that a thought doesn't become real until the key unlocks the emotion, and then the thought starts to metastasize into A, which is the action. So belief, thought, feeling, action. If you reverse engineer all the ways in life that are showing up that you're not happy with, or all the ways that your life is showing up that you would want to be different, it's usually connected to some type of feeling, some type of thought, which is always, in my opinion, 100% connected to a belief. Mm-hmm. And the belief is really the deepest unpacking, the most uncomfortable unpacking. If it was super easy to just change our thoughts, like all the hundreds of thousands of personal development books say, positive thinking, then everybody would be healed.
Just say stop and clap and move on.
Yeah, like it's not like even,
Tell that to my limbic system, which is like, nope.
Even these people that like, there's a guy that has this process called the emotion code, and he like waves a magnet over your head. And I'm like, to me, that just seems ludicrous, because it's not addressing the deeper core. The deeper core, by the way, that belief, the BTFA, I believe through my research in emotional epigenetics, AKA the transfer of not just physical things like type 1 diabetes in our physiology, but also hypervigilance and lack of trust or trauma bonding, and all the things that transfer from our lineage go 7 lines back. And there was actually a study in I believe it was a South African hospital, where they would traumatize a male rat. and they would test its neurology for 7 generations beyond, even when when the female rats that weren't traumatized would bond with that same rat. And in 7 generations of rats being born, the neurology and the hypervigilance were found in the offspring 7 generations further from that initially traumatized mouse. Now, we're not mice, but we have similar ways in which the electricity in our body flows, just like it does with mice. And so I find that really fascinating that science always looks at the physiological or the biological things that get transferred on from our lineage. But it's really this up and coming wing of science and spirituality that I love, that I'm really passionate about. And that is, why do we act the ways we don't want to act, even when we know we don't want to do them? And it's utterly fascinating if you really tie it back to that B in the BTFA, that belief that's installed. Yes, it could have come in utero. Like, a mother could be super stressed and then the baby could come out with hypervigilance. But it goes much further back, because if you look at the work of Mark Wolin, he wrote a book called It Didn't Start With You. It's about intergenerational trauma. And in the book, he says that when you were born and came out of your mother, when you were still in her womb, all the eggs that were ever in your system were already inside of you when you were inside of her. And the same thing with her grandmother and your great-great-grandmother. So you cannot tell me that emotions don't transfer down the epigenetic line just like physiological things do. And so the B is really the deepest work. Everybody can do the work to change their thoughts. Everybody can do the work to change their feeling by putting yourself in state, breathwork, cold plunge, ecstatic dance, whatever, singing. But the action is really what we're looking for. We all want the action. We all want the peace. We want to feel safe. We want to feel like our actions are in alignment with us, with who we are as a person. But the paradox is that we first have to know ourselves enough of the beliefs that are truly not serving us. And I hear that phrase so much, in personal development, spirituality, let go of the things that don't serve you, brother. And it's like, it's not that fucking easy. Like, you actually, when you go into the B of the BTFA, you really have to do a deep emotional inventory. And that inventory could look like journaling. It could look like doing a plant medicine ceremony. It could look like having a conscious relationship where you share the beliefs about the person or about the relationship that are causing you fear. And I find, like, I wonder how you feel. I find like 10 times out of 10, if I can just be vulnerable enough to share exactly where I am with my beliefs, even if they're completely insane. Like, for example, right now I have a belief that relationships don't work. It's still in there. I'm 44. It's still in there. I'm still letting go and shedding the fact that both of my parents have been divorced and remarried twice, and now they're both not married. And here I am in year number 5 of our relationship, and we're still not married. So I get to own my role in that of like, well, what kind of lack of trust and what's the belief set that I have that I'm consciously or unconsciously projecting onto my lady? And of course she has her work to do too. That's why I'm saying earlier in our podcast, both people have to be willing to kneel at that altar of vulnerability. If both people aren't really willing to look at the B of the BTFA, and if we get caught in the trap of only looking at the thoughts, feelings, and actions, I think we miss out on the actual fulcrum of change. The real way that we change is by going super deep as we possibly can, into the B, into the beliefs. And it's really, really shocking at times.
Yeah,
because we could find that our beliefs aren't even ours.
Yeah.
We inherited them from our mom or dad or from our great-grandparents.
That I like in some way, because I feel like it gives me a little bit of the space between myself and what is, and how my behaviors in some way, just saying, can I unpack where this might have come from? Perhaps it's me, right? I'm always navigating, like many people who are listening, I'm always navigating my lack of self-worth in the most ridiculous ways, where like now as an adult, I'll call someone who I love and trust and say, can you tell me I'm a good person? I need to have this conversation. It doesn't have to last more than 90 seconds. I need to hear somebody tell me something nice about me, which feels wildly vulnerable. And also like navigating the ego space, right? Like I'm not trying to get attention, but also I'm feeling like I really want to make connection, which I think it is all about. And then noting, we were talking about hypervigilance earlier. The details really don't matter about me, but the point is I started to look back more recently, like on how my grandmother behaved and how she was in the household, and that there a lot of the things, because she was a lot of my caregiving that I had when I was younger, that those things not only genetically are in me, but environmentally from mirroring her as a child and seeing her worry a lot, seeing her be in hypervigilance. And so that, again, I'm not trying to own my own shit. I'm owning my own shit.
Yeah.
And also I'm trying to discover, and what I hope people can do, like you're talking about, is discover a bit more of the avenues that all come together to the street we walk now. Because knowing that it's not to place blame, like you said, like the Handel group has a really beautiful exercise they call parent traits, and you can do it with grandparents or whoever, where you almost write out some traits that you think are, you're sort of making a judgment on it, but things that you really notice came strongly in your parents, your folks, your grandparents. And then you sort of caricature them by giving them a name. Like, so for example, my father, who's passed on and wouldn't mind me talking about this anyway, I was like, oh, this caricature name of this part of his trait is the yes man. Because I watched him be like, yes man, tell my mom, like, don't ask for permission, beg for forgiveness. Or my mom would ask him, did you call the plumber? And he'd be like, yeah. But like, no, of course not. And he just figure it out after. But there was all this like yes manning, which was like in a conflict avoidant piece, right? I don't want to have conflict. I just want to tell her what she wants to hear. I want to like just get out of the house or do whatever. And then where does that, then you look at it and say, does that show up for me? Right? My mother has something that's like, everything must have its place, lady. Because she would be like, this belongs here and this belongs here. And I know you said it could go there, but if it's not here, everything's falling apart. And then where those things reflect back on you, right? Where you took them on as part of your, like, this is my assignment as a human to have this quality. And so I think there's interesting ways people can practice, dredging these things up from their past, and also their own landscape of the people that they are.
Well, don't you feel like we're all looking for this alchemization of our ancestry? We're wanting to take the good and discard the bad. I hate to even use those terms. Let's just say we're wanting to take the peaceful and powerful attributes of our upbringers, and we're wanting to leave the rest. It's like, I remember I was in a Vipassana in 2016, and this guy Goenka was on the television screen, and we had just finished meditating for like an entire week, which is so insane. I actually do not recommend people do a Vipassana. It's pretty hardcore.
Yeah.
But he said something really powerful that Bruce Lee has said. He said, when it comes to everything we've taught you, take what resonates and leave the rest. And I thought, that's beautiful. And I think that's what we want to do with our parents, and even the internal family systems from Richard Schwartz, and probably some of the people that we've interviewed on our podcast. They have similar methodologies of how we unpack the things that have happened to us, or the gifts that we've received from our ancestry. I remember I was interviewing Teal Swan, and she has this ancestral healing course, which I went through, and I'm still actually going through it now, which
that
is kind of cool.
That interview is fire, by the way, for anyone.
She's amazing.
Like, anyone go back and listen to Wellness and Wisdom with Teal. She's like, that's just both of you. It's like a fire interview.
Yeah,
for sure.
You either love her or you hate her.
It's like, let her be polarizing. I'm so happy for that for her, yeah.
Well, the people that are doing the best work are the ones that are loved and hated, because they're coming up against all the cognitive biases of people that want to stay stuck.
Yeah.
That's a big news flash.
And also in marketing, in the world of marketing, I always used to give presentations saying a unicorn is a horse with a point of view. Like, you gotta show up, and you have to know how you really feel about something, and not be afraid to kind of like, I'm going to mask this a little so it lands more softly.
Right. Just like, be authentic.
Yeah. And because there is a little bit of this ancestral thing. I see it a lot on social now, which is like, the shining image of the woman who's like cutting the rope, and there's like 9 more women falling off the swing being like, I'm breaking ancestral ties. And I love that people are bringing that language into the awareness, but I don't love that it's like the roadmap is not there.
Sure. Ooh, this is so good. Okay, so what I was mentioning about Teal, and I'm going to butcher the quote a little bit, but she essentially said, whatever you continue to resent about your ancestry owns you. And I think Lao Tzu talked about this in one of the oldest texts, the Tao. He said that resentment is a hot coal, and you're the only one that gets burned. It's like the other person doesn't even know that you resent them, or maybe they do, and that's why they don't talk to you on some energetic level. So I have an altar over here in the studio, and it's got my family members there, and I see it every day. I see my grandparents, I see my mom.
Like checking in.
I just look over at them. And I think that's how we really go into the alchemization of our ancestry and start really doing the honest, and like capital H honest work of letting go of our ancestry. They would have let go of it, and they would have healed it if they knew. but they didn't know. You and I are afforded so much spaciousness.
and
We're so
grace.
spoiled. Look at what we're doing for a living. We're sitting and having conversations about how to be well. Do you think this was even in their lexicon? They had no idea that this was even possible. And so it's our loving responsibility to do the fucking work so that we can not just cut the cord of them, but to actually honor them and say, hey, I know you didn't even know you didn't know. I love you. This has been the challenge of my life, and I completely accept and understand that you are in a different generation than me. Mm-hmm. I mean, just the healing that can come from that. You know, the question you asked me when you first started, like, what's the biggest wisdom? After 10 years of podcasting, this is still the wisdom that's getting integrated, and that is how to forgive those who have hurt me, how to forgive those who have trespassed against me, and even how to forgive my woman in our relationship now, and how to forgive people that come into my podcast ecosystem and just take from me and then leave, or people that just pretend to be my friend because they want something and then they leave. And I get to look at myself as like, okay, well, what's my deciphering mechanism? What's my intuition mechanism? Why do I let these people in? Right? That's just a continued lesson. And how can I tie it back to probably how my parents and grandparents and great-great-grandparents felt in their lives when those very same things happened to them in its own unique way. So the long of the short that I'm getting at is I think that's the real deepest, most crunchy, uncomfortable work that there isn't always a map for. Like there's the IFS systems from Schwartz, and you know our friend Mark Groves has some great training programs, and I think all coaches have somewhat of a good framework.
It's like who speaks to you.
Yeah, but it has to be really flexible. It's got to be like a reed with deep roots. Because if there's a big storm that comes, like let's say there's a loss of a family member or a major disease or an injury, that could break somebody if they don't have a reed that has deep roots. So I think it's really about, you know, the answer to many of your questions so far has been the same answer delivered in many different learning ways. And that is, on a continued basis, how can I practice forgiveness for myself, for my lineage, for people that I love, and disappointments that I have in my life? Because if I don't choose to forgive, then it owns me. It makes me sick. It gives me disease. It makes me not show up loving. And I don't want, that's not the game I'm interested in playing. I'm interested in playing a much more fun and expansive game. Yet this is the work. And I think this is why I'm so passionate about this concept of emotional epigenetics. I love it. It's something that I'm really interested in because I feel it within me and all of us. Yeah. Yet there isn't really a map in the way that I think I need. So I'm creating that map right now.
Yeah, that's so exciting.
Yes.
I love that. And I want to harken back briefly to just you saying, who uses the word harken? I want to just,
a good word.
It's a good word.
Yeah.
To talking about a bit about the vulnerability piece and the partnership, or I think a lot of this work really comes down to like who you have around reflecting back upon you. Because even when you come back to the statement, take what you want and leave the rest, there's a notion of it like the disconfirming information has to be there. The like, I don't understand that. I'm going to take it even though I don't know if I want it. The piece. And I think sometimes the friends or the lovers, the partners, whoever it might be in our life that we surround ourselves with, are the people that are reflecting back, hey, you kind of left that over there. Maybe you should look at that too. Or this is what I'm seeing in you. And I just also love that you say you have to both be like kneeling in partnership, if we're speaking about partnership. Yeah. But I think also in my very closest friendships, which are the most important relationships right now for me, you all have to be kneeling at the altar together to say, we're willing to kind of do this work together, to reflect back upon each other. The real deal. I had a woman in the ice 2 weeks ago, and quite often I will ask people I'm plunging in the midst of the plunge when they're going through the moments, tell me one special, unique quality you bring to the world right now. Like, tell me the thing that is essentially you, that you just bring it. And the woman said, she was like, happened to be naked in the plunge. And she said to me, she just looked up to me and she was like, I am the person who tells people the thing that no one else will tell them about themselves. And I just thought, I want to be your fucking friend.
Yeah.
That's like a big win. And also what a brave soul to be the person to like, hopefully kindly share that information. And so do you feel like, I just would love to hear, I'm sure, of course, your woman is one of those people, but who are the people who are like, you hold those ties to trust and be connected with? And what are some things maybe you've learned from them?
You know what it is this table and my podcast. That is I learn so much from every single person, sometimes more from many of them, sometimes less, but I always get at least one really big nugget that I can integrate and embody in my life. So I think the podcast has become its own entity where it's this vehicle of my own public learning, public healing. And I think that's why people enjoy it, because we're all yearning for these conversations. And in the age of technology and AI and screens and Zoom, there's so much disconnection that being in person and having long form conversations, or even just having vulnerable conversations, are really rare. And it's a skill set that, especially for men, for dudes, is not practiced. Maybe here in Austin, you might feel like there's a bubble of, Bitcoin guys that have breathwork certifications and a ponytail and a cinnamon bun on their head. But if you look at America, or just North America specifically, I think that's a really small percentage. If I had to guess, it's like, I don't know, 20, 30, 10% of men that are even willing to sit and talk like this. And there's a lot of conditioning. If we look at the collective emotional epigenetics around why men don't share, vulnerability is perceived as weakness. I can think of many moments in my life just watching how my father would behave, where he would, I don't think I ever, I'm trying to remember, I don't believe, I've never seen him cry.
Wow.
Not once. Even the death of his father and his mother, he never cried.
Wow.
And at first, it just so perplexed me. I'm like, how could a man never cry? And it's because he had major conditioning that crying equals weakness. But we know from thermodynamics that energy cannot be created or destroyed. And so if you push down sadness for long enough, it's going to come out sideways. And lo and behold, he had major stomach issues. He's had a heart surgery. He's had a lot of physical things that I believe are a manifestation of the stuck, pushed down energy, or the depression, opposite of expression, that he, maybe didn't know how to feel. B, even if he knew how to feel it, there was so much conditioning and fear in him that he could never express it safely. But it's quite sad, because on the tail end of that, who suffers is the people that want relationship with him. So that's like hearkening back to your initial question, like, what's the biggest wisdom that I've learned? It's to learn how to love people exactly where they are, but without bullshit, without just a head game. Oh yeah, you hear this a lot. Oh yeah, I love my parents. I had a great childhood. It's just such a subliminal rug that's pulled over trauma and pain. I'm talking about really going in there and doing psychic surgery on yourself, or with a guide or a coach, where you actually physiologically, somatically can forgive and can let go, so that it doesn't own you, so that you can breathe easy. And so really the greatest gift is so that I or you don't project it on the people that we love. I don't want to project my father's pain or his inability to feel,
or the rock that I'm holding of resentment for it all.
Or the rock that I'm resenting that then my children pay the price for, or my friends pay the price for, or my woman pays the price for. That's just not, that's a lose-lose game. So the win-win game is doing the work to become a really good player. And the whole total fucking twist is that we're the player and we're the programmer at the same time, which is such a trip. We're literally creating our own reality, and we're the player in that reality. I mean, that's maybe a sidebar on a different podcast, but like, it's true.
No, but that's real. That's the meta experience.
That's the meta. So I think it's dancing with all of this and doing my very best to not get caught up. I would say that the biggest piece for me is to not get caught up in just the intellectual learning, but to actually give myself spaciousness for the somatic understanding, because that's where everything really lives anyways. All the books I talked about in the living library, they live in our meridians, they live in our gut, they live in our enteric nervous system, they live in our neural tree. Like they don't just live in my head, is what I'm saying. It's in my body. Have you ever been around somebody, you just feel good around them? You're like, this person's really like, I love their energy, right? Well, that's the redox system communicating from my gut microbiome to yours. That's the micro muscles in my face that make you feel safe, or make me feel safe from you. But all these things are happening in a totally unconscious way. Yeah. And so it's the unconscious clean out of the BTFA. That's the hardest thing. I mean, that's like literally a lifetime of work, I think, for all of us.
Yeah, and then the irony that you're, I think the irony of some of the things that you're speaking about specifically with males really is, regardless of who you're being intimate with or what have you, like that, there's nothing more than the female energy wants than the male to actually just speak all the things and say the vulnerabilities or the truths or what have you, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's like we're just in that, a bit of that waiting cycle, right? Depending on, it's like I can't, even how I'm speaking is like you can't not address the whole, like there's just like the cancel culture, the mix of all of the like male female energies, but there are, do you feel like there's like, I've heard you talk about this briefly before, but just there are roles that we show up and we play genetically, physiologically, however we're born into this world. And there's a lot of this like navigating through the male and female experience. But if you look at the divine feminine as like a bit of the chaos, and you look at the divine masculine as a bit more of like the structure or the foundation that can contain that, again, not in an ownership way.
Sure.
But those two energies figuring out how to work together is a lot of what we're trying to unpack, I think, as we human together.
You're on the pulse of it. Like you're literally touching. I just had this conversation yesterday.
But it gets sticky quickly. It's like talking about like God and religion and beliefs, and like this is important conversation. And I have so many friends, that non-binary friends, and like mixes of all different styles of people and preferences. But the reality is there are roles that we end up landing in.
Sure.
I want to unpack that a little bit. Yeah.
Well, I think if you look at nature, I always go back to nature as the most amazing teacher, because if we ever divorce ourselves fully from nature, which is kind of maybe what
we're headed,
Elon Musk and AI wants us to do. They're like, no nature, you will eat bugs and live in a 15-minute city and you will own nothing and love it. I say, fuck that. But if we ever like really want to fully divorce ourselves from nature, I think that is the telltale sign of a society completely being decimated. If you look at Mao and the early underpinnings of Chinese communism, they would make all the men and women wear the same clothes, and they would make them shave their heads because they wanted to destroy gender. They wanted to destroy gender roles, because when you're confused about your gender, you're very easily manipulated. It's also what the Bible talks about with the Jezebel spirit and Ahab. The Jezebel spirit is a very self-serving, narcissistic, hedonistic, sexual, pervasive predator, I guess you could say. And it likes to just take, and without any feeling or bearing on how it impacts people around them. And there's many religions and many mythologies that talk about this energy. You know, for example, Paul Levy talks about the Wetiko, which is the Native American mind virus. And so every walk of life and every faith has their own vernacular around it, but I think it's all the same energy. And I think what the energy is when you can confuse someone about sex, which is the creation point of life, right? If you can get in someone's psyche and actually start to twist it and tweak it and make them think they're a man when they're a woman, and go against the law of nature is what I'm saying. You start divorcing yourself from nature. You start divorcing yourself from your creator. You start confusing people at the very basal level. This is why, child trafficking and child sex crimes are so heinous, because it's so hard to come back from that. You know, once you scar somebody at that level, it's like, it's a lifetime of work, if they ever even come back. Yeah. So what I'm getting at is I think really the attack on not just the family or gender roles is really just a complete ignorance of nature. It's like putting blinders on and saying, I'm so smart, I'm going to ignore how I was born with my chromosomes. I'm going to ignore the laws of nature. I'm going to ignore everything about spirituality. I'm going to completely cut myself off from God. And I'm just going to live life from my own ego, from my own hubris. This is what a lot of the people that, don't believe in anything, like I'm forgetting their names because I don't even play in that realm, but the people that don't believe in God, atheists, right?
Yeah.
So atheists, they're so devout.
I was like, libertarians? No, atheists.
The atheists are so devout that there is no God, that becomes their belief. It's a paradox. They believe there's no God because they say they can't believe it, but then they believe that there isn't one.
And that's their belief. Or the flying spaghetti monster? Is that like part of that thing?
I don't know what that is. I've never heard of it.
So the flying, if there's some simple roots in like atheism that's like, well, if we're going to believe in one of these 20 other things that the world may believe in a religious standpoint, from a religious standpoint, and we believe in nothing, we might as well believe in something. So we're just going to believe in the flying spaghetti monster. It's like some old little, like, Reddit thread or something, but it's been around for a little while. And I think it comes from like being born out of that philosophy of like exactly what you're saying. It's like believing in nothing is also believing in something.
Right. You're still choosing to believe that there's nothing to believe in, which then is counter logical to your argument of there is no God. So I say when it comes to a belief, if it makes you feel good and it doesn't harm others and that belief actually helps others, it's probably a great one. Because we're a programmer and a player in our own game that we're literally coding. I may as well enjoy the damn thing. I may as well have the best life possible. And so if my belief is actually harmful to other people, then that's a belief that I get to look at. But we live in a society where you can kind of operate in a complete echo chamber and surround yourself with people that only believe what you believe, which then further reinforces your belief and creates a bias towards receiving any new information. Like I'll talk to anybody about almost anything. But as soon as I can tell that their beliefs are set in stone and they're not really willing to hear what I have to say, like for example, we posted this clip on Instagram and it was like myself and my family playing, and it was this beautiful poem that Fireside Acres, it's a Instagram channel, posted, and it said, men and women are not the same. It's not about competition. It's about creation. It was just this beautiful honoring of family. And all these people DM'd me, well, what about the trans people? And what about the gay people? I'm like, this wasn't about them. This wasn't about anti them. This was about pro what my beliefs are making me happy for. And I find that there's this really weird soup that we're all swimming around in right now in modernity. And it says, if you put out something or if you express yourself and it's different than mine, then I get to publicly challenge you and publicly attack you. And what they're forgetting is that if their belief is so strong within them, then they shouldn't feel the need to challenge it in others. I'm not sitting on a podcast saying gay people are bad, trans people are bad. I would never say that. That's their choice. Yeah. But yet, these are the very groups that attack me and slander me when I'm just expressing love for my family. Yeah. You see the craziness here?
I absolutely see the craziness.
It's
I want to
insane.
have the conversations more, and I think more often, and I think they don't become conversations and everybody's like, the strongest keyboard jockey when they're behind their screen.
Everybody's a hero.
But if you put them in a room together,
yeah.
I doubt that the behavior would actually fall that same way. I think that I'd like to believe more people would be talking to each other about just confirming information, right? The things that they're like, we are not equal on this thought. Let's talk about it some more.
Yes.
And I'm sure there would be like some bar brawls as well. It just like depends on who's showing up in that room. But I'm always surprised at what comes up. It happens in the women's health space a lot as well. And even in the cold space, like I have a little traditional Chinese medicine docs like coming at me because I'm putting women in the cold water.
Oh, right.
And that's cold womb. And you're not allowed to do that.
Yeah.
It's not okay. And I joke about the libertarians, but I'm a big believer really in just like sort of you get to do what you want with your body if you're trying something on for size or experimenting or whatever, like have at it. That includes going in cold or picking your nose. Like, I don't care. But, it's an interesting thing, this like keyboard jockey thing that exists. And I also, there's some other, there's a lot of beautiful stuff that you're always putting in the world. And I think that there's also a notion, like what's the most unpopular opinion you think you've put out there that's gotten the most heat?
Oh my God, it's your exact question about roles.
Yeah.
About the roles of nature.
Yeah.
But I don't give a shit. Like, I really don't. I believe that a man is a man and a woman is a woman. If people want to believe differently, so be it. I'm not here to attack or challenge them.
Right.
I'm really not.
Right.
I like the only part about the transgender movement that I believe is deeply harmful is when you have a child that cuts off their sex organs. I believe that's incredibly...
Like prepubescently.
Yeah, I mean, if a child can't pick their dinner and you're allowing them to chop off their sex organs, that's insanity. That's actually, that's hijacking a moral code to be publicly seen as woke or righteous, and you're sacrificing the innocence of your child. Yeah. I think that's demonic and evil. And I don't condone that.
And I listen, again, it's a slippery slope to talk about this, but this is where we're at. And there's a lot, there's some literature out there that talks a bit about people who have gone through full transition and then challenges that at younger ages and then challenges that they may have found later saying, I needed to go through the full hormonal like psychology and transition of my own being. And then they're wanting to either transition back or having other challenges show up. Now, again, it's like, I'm not generalizing. I'm talking about one or two pieces of literature that are having that conversation, but it's so nuanced. It's so nuanced. And then I think where I stand in alignment with you so much is just this, at what point is a parental agreement to do something, where does that end, or where is the protection mechanism, right? And where does that end? Because you're going to have opinions on both sides. Parents that are like super pro, my kid gets to do whatever they want, and I want to support my child. And then there's always going to be a scientific argument that there's like so many. I mean, I think about the choices I made at 13 years old. Like, I don't know what end was up. I was dressing in boys' clothes, and I was a tomboy, and I was like, I hope I never get boobs because I don't want to be that. I'm a runner, and I'm an athlete, and I don't want them to be in the way, and I'm nervous about boys and sex and how it's supposed to be. Like, there's so many things going on in my body simultaneously, and I've never been in a male body, but I imagine your hormones are going crazy as well.
Yeah.
And it's like, I couldn't make good decisions for myself, even if I wanted to.
Right.
At that age. And so fascinating.
We don't have the agency that we have as adults. Like I don't
We're
know
not fully formed either.
Yeah, I don't know the exact science, right? But I think the brain is still developing up to 25 or 27, something like that.
Yeah, when I had Asprey on the podcast and I asked him a question at the end of the show, I ask a lot. So this is a good preempt for you. And I say, what if you could go back and speak to, I used to say like your 11-year-old self, what would you tell them that would land you in, hey, here's my one piece of advice for you to be like in the best well-being possible. And Asprey was like, of course, this is very typical of Dave. He's like, well, I wouldn't say anything to my 11-year-old brain isn't formed enough to really even grok that information. So like, you'd have to give me another age. And I was like, okay. You pick the age, Dave.
Ask me at 25 or 27. You know what I would, or well, I'll wait to answer it later. You're going to ask it later?
No, let's chop it up. Machete style.
Here's what I would do. If I was able to teleport back to 25 or 27, I would put my hand on my own chest and I would say, take 3 deep breaths, because what I'm about to tell you is really, really important. And it's coming from a place of love. And I know you haven't received a lot of love the way you wanted to in your life, but I'm here to give it to you right now. So I need you to listen.
Can you describe yourself at 25? Just like a
25, I was deep in pornography addiction. I was a personal trainer. I had a 6-pack. Everything looked good on paper. I was having, quote, the best time of my life, but then drinking, partying, sexualizing women, living in Pacific Beach, San Diego, California, which is like the epicenter of hedonism back then in 2005. Wow, that's a long time ago.
But so beautiful that you're like, let me breathe with you 3 breaths so you can actually downregulate and take this in.
And I would look right into my eyes and I would say, you see what everybody else is doing? If you want to really live life, because I know you do the exact opposite of what everyone else is doing, because they're all chasing temporary things and you're worth something much more. And I would make sure that he heard it, because if I could go back, a lot of people say everything happened for a reason and it's all perfect. I call bullshit. I actually think I could have suffered less and I would have been cool suffering less. Mm-hmm. So I would put my hand on my own chest. I would make myself take the 3 deep breaths and I would speak to myself like I know I would need to be spoken to. Mm-hmm. And I would start to unpack, like, you see all these people doing drugs, you know the porn, that feeling that you feel when your like skin is crawling, you don't know what to do. I want you to go jump in a cold lake. I want you to go hike a mountain, and I want you to lay on your back, and I want you to thank God that you're still alive. And I want you to just be grateful that you're a fucking human being in a body. And I want you to read these 3 books, and I want you to do this. And I would just start directing. I would be a father to myself that I never had, and that most men actually don't ever have, and I'm sure for women too. But I would connect with that part of myself that already knows what I'm saying is true, and I would make him feel it. Not because he needs to feel it, but because he wants to feel it. Yeah. He wants so deeply to trust life. He wants so deeply to know that everything is going to be okay. He wants so deeply to know that it's not his fault and that life isn't out to get him and that people don't have malevolent intent all the time. And I guarantee you that would have shifted the trajectory of my life profoundly. I would most likely be a multimillionaire and I would have been teaching 10 years prior the stuff that I'm learning now. I don't say that from shame or judgment. It's like, here I am, make the best of it. I think that's part of actually the code of life, is to make the best of your situation and to not hold on to how it could have been. But, in total truth, if you're asking me, what would I have said? I would have said something that would have made him suffer a lot less, because I don't think that everything happens perfectly for a reason. I think that we intellectualize it. I think that we twist the game, because it's actually part of the code where if I didn't say that everything happened for a reason, then I'm a victim, which that's disempowering. I don't want to live that life.
Yeah.
But the cold reality that most personal development doesn't want to talk about is that everything doesn't always happen for a reason. It's the reason that we made it happen for that's actually after the fact. But if we could teleport and go back and cause ourselves less suffering, of course there's going to be suffering, because that's how we learn. But the degree of suffering does not have to be so vast for people to learn a lesson. They have to be mature enough to receive the wisdom to learn the lesson. But sometimes our ego, or if we're stuck on the Hawkins scale at pride, and we can't ever get to courage, we can't ever get to willingness, we can't ever get to acceptance, then we can stifle ourselves. We can circulate for years. And many people, Kristen, don't ever get out of it. I've met 50, 60, 70-year-olds that are a complete and utter victim in their life. And it's because they're grasping so tightly to how it should have been or how it could have been. That's not a game I want to play either. So what I'm saying is, like, yes, everything happens for a reason, because we say so, to make us the opposite of a victim, to make us empowered from our past. But also, many people, if you gave them the chance to like do the Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure and ride the phone booth back in time, they would go back and they would meet themselves, and they would pick an age. Like for me, it was probably 27, 28. And they would tell themselves exactly what they needed to hear so that they could suffer less. We're not going to get out of this life without suffering, but we do not have to suffer as much as we do. I think the learning curve can be shortened, which is why you and I do what we're doing. We want to shorten that learning curve of suffering for people, so that they can then take that time, months, years, decades of not suffering, and actually enjoy the thing and like live in this beautiful life that our Creator has created for us. So I would love to go back in time. If that technology exists in my lifetime, I wonder, like butterfly effect or, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. That would be so cool.
Well, and I've done some reparenting work and parts work and stuff that gives you a little bit of that opportunity, but you don't get to go back and be in that exact body.
Right. You're going back like you're closing your eyes and you're going back in your timeline.
Put this bikini on, put this mankini on, go run around the beaches. Stop giving a shit so much.
Yeah. I think I really love this. I think that's the sadness that most people don't want to feel, is the fallacy of like the sunk cost fallacy or the cost of living life fallacy. Everybody at some point in their life gets to a place where they wish things were different. I know you felt that. I've definitely felt that. I think that's a human thing where we wish things were different.
Yeah.
And I think it's that desire and that wish for things to be different that keep us hungry and keep us curious about how we can make them different.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a game.
Yeah, it is really
I don't want to make light of it, but it's really a fucking game. Like we're programming it, we're playing it, and we're the main character, and it doesn't serve us to be disempowered yet. We don't have to suffer as much.
Yeah.
We just don't.
And I think I'm in a place, if you can't see my phone screen, but like I'm in a place in my life where I feel like acceptance is the path to reducing suffering. Do you feel like, is there more in there? What's next? Do you know what's next after acceptance? Because I'm trying to get there faster. We're going to reduce some suffering within ourselves. Acceptance is a hard one for me. It's the one that I get stuck on. It's the one that's like, how can I let go versus give up, right?
I'm glad you said that, because it's actually the screensaver on my phone. I have the chart of emotions right here.
Nice.
So after acceptance is reason.
This is how you know you're a good coach, when you have all the screensavers of all the shit you need to do to take care of your mind.
And maybe we can put this in the show notes. So pride it resonates at 175.
A frequency chart.
A frequency chart. This is
this
is the Hawkins frequency chart. Our buddy Mike Zeller uses this chart. A lot of people actually use this chart. I bet you, if you went into the curriculum of Tony Robbins, Hawkins' work is baked into that as well.
Yeah.
I'm sure it is.
Yeah.
So after 175 hertz, there's courage at 200. Then there's neutrality at 250, then willingness at 310, and then acceptance at 350. And then our ability to reason is at 400, and then love is 500. So above the acceptance is reason and love. But I think the reason acceptance is so hard to get to is because before acceptance is courage. And courage is at 200. Well, guess what blocks courage? Pride. It should have been different. You know, the 70-year-olds I was talking about. It should have been different. They harmed me. And it's like they're actually just reinforcing a really shitty game for themselves over and over and over again. And what they need is a hug and probably to sit in a cold tub for a minute, go hike a mountain and like just disconnect from the story they've been telling themselves.
Yeah.
And then get to a place where they actually can have the willingness to change and have the acceptance to reason. Because, you know, as you know, I know you've gone deep into neurology and you know, human psychology. We don't have any blood in our PFC and our prefrontal cortex when we're in complete sympathetic dominance. It doesn't exist. You know, I don't have any reason thinking in my PFC when I'm completely in fight or flight. It just doesn't work. Like it's actually a hardware thing, you know, it's not even a software thing.
It's a protective mechanism. It's like, thank goodness.
It's a protection. It's good.
Like we just got to go.
and actually it served us for a really long time, right? Like when we were living in tribes and when we didn't have shelter and there was animals, like that was actually a good thing that we had an amygdala that like shocked us really quickly. But we're still operating on that same old school biological framework in modernity that doesn't have the same threats, yet they feel the same. And that's the paradox of this whole human evolution and even, you know, the rise of AI and technology is that we're really running on old software. And just like our phone needs an update, like hopefully this podcast is an update to someone's software where they can go, maybe it's not my dad's fault. Maybe it's not my mom's fault. You know, to quote Handel, maybe it's you. That was her book, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe it's me, because I'm the only common denominator in every relationship or in my entire life game. So that's what I'm working on. I think that's what we all get to work on is a true reprogramming of our BTFA. And then I think what really helps us get deep on the B is the emotional epigenetics, because when we start to really understand ourselves and understand the alchemy of what brought us here, then we can give forgiveness, right? And I wonder where even on the scale forgiveness
also where's gratitude on that
resonates.
scale?
Yeah, I need a better screenshot here, but yeah, like the ability to forgive comes after we've felt the sadness, felt the grief, felt the anger. If we don't feel that, you know, I'm sure in the cold or in your retreats, like people probably cry and scream at times.
Yeah, all different things.
All the time, right?
All different things. I haven't had someone have like a full-blown orgasm quite yet. But
Oh, okay.
I mean, they get close.
Well, that's a release. Like sometimes when I do really deep breathwork journeys, I'll yawn like 50 times.
Oh, for sure.
And my eyes will start watering and I'm like, I'm not crying, but I'm crying here. Like what's going on? And I'm realizing that this is all these other stuck emotions that are coming out of me that were just in there and I didn't even know they were in there. So there's really something to this acceptance that we're both, you know, spiritual beings and physical beings. And the physical is really important for science, and the spiritual portion is really important for understanding emotions and spirituality and emotional epigenetics. I think there's room for science and spirit at the table both.
Oh, I hope so. Otherwise, I think we're screwed because we don't have the dual perspective to say what's happening on both. This is why I think somatics and somatic experiences are going to continue to be on the rise, that people start to say like the body just needs to understand on its own physically this every 200 milliseconds as it's checking in that it's safe and it's happening there first, right? And then I'm a firm believer that even with the way we breathe, like is the breath coming before that check-in? Is it the byproduct of that check-in happening? Because that's happening before our brain is connected to the thought of that, right? The aggregation of 50 or 100 of those moments, and then maybe we're feeling into it. We're not feeling. We're beginning to formulate a thought for that, or like a general emotion. I feel sad as a combination of all of those little moments. So it's like, how do we get to the place where our breath is checking in? Like it's theorized, right? No one really knows which is coming first. Is it how we breathe because of the environmental stimuli, or is it that the environmental stimuli is happening and then that's, you know, it's chicken and egg a bit, like which is coming when? And so I just I would love to hear a little bit about your philosophy of breath, because I know that you've written some things on breath and you've been so deeply woven into that. And we'd be remiss to not talk about the breath vibes, because we both have such deep roots in them.
Yeah. In 2015, I did a workshop with Commander Mark Devine from SEAL Fit. And I was laying in a room in the Omni in Carlsbad. It's this beautiful hotel. And I was laying around all these like really driven, some special forces people. And my eyes started crying. We were doing this, I think it was like a partial holotropic session, or maybe just like a connected breath session. It was actually Dan Brule. Now that I haven't thought about this in a long time.
He's coming on my show.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah.
Okay, so Dan Brule took us through a breath work at
That's
the
so
SEAL
cool.
Fit
He's
event.
sort of one of the people who brought it over to this sort of Western culture.
In 2015.
Whoa.
And then I was like, what is this? I feel so good. Why do I feel so good? Why was I crying? It was just like, I didn't know what the hell was going on. And then in 2016, I did a bunch of different courses in Encinitas. And then in 2017, I did Mark Devine's 20X, which is like this overnight crucible Navy SEAL training.
I was reading about it because I heard that you did that, and I was like, what is this?
Yeah.
It's like badass.
It's really badass. I mean, it's really physically challenging.
Yeah.
And you can get to peak states through many different ways. But one thing I really loved about Mark Devine's work is he had this SOP where you would do like a breath work post-workout, and you would, let what you did alchemize and just, be in your body. And then in 2018 and 2019, I went down the route of ayahuasca, which that's a whole nother story. I got completely shattered, and thank God I knew a healer that was able to repair me, basically. And
How did you choose ayahuasca?
Ayahuasca came into my life in 2016
versus all the other things that are out there, because there's so many.
I was in a relationship at the time, and she was like, we have to do this. And so she introduced me to it. And it was actually really disgusting. I hated it the first time. I was like, this is not for me. But then there was this one little moment where I just felt like I was being held from a grandmother that I had never been held by in my life. And it was like this peak of love and understanding that I had always longed for. And so that was one little moment in 12 hours of crap, throwing up and everything. And so many years later, I went deep and did 12 journeys, had a psychic break. But the beauty of that is that when we were doing breath work, as the sun was coming up on the very last night of the ceremony, I could actually feel my lungs stretching, and I was connecting the small portions of DMT that were being released in my body. And I thought to myself, oh, this is really powerful. I need to do this as much as possible. So that night at the place, I bought breathwork.io. And then I traveled around the world for a year. I went to Sedona with Anahata Ananda, and then I learned from Gwen Payne, and then I learned from Niraj Naik in Thailand for a month, and I just traveled around. And then I thought, okay, I could actually teach this because I've done enough of it now and I've traveled enough. And so then I launched breathwork.io, and I had 1,000 students in there, and people got really great results. And then it just was, I felt like I was done. I felt like I was called to something else, and I let it go. It's actually still out there, and it's funny, people still purchase it. It's been many years since it came out. But the breath for me has always been this deep reminder that I can control when I feel like I'm not safe. And that control is really powerful because, as you know, as a practitioner, breath is the only autonomic lever we can pull, right? We can't digest our own food. We can't beat our own heart, but we can be breathed and we can breathe. It's just amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah.
The power of breath work is truly life-changing. You could just focus on breath work and psychotherapeutics and coaching, and that could be your only thing. You might never have to touch plant medicine in your whole life if you just did breath work and really good coaching and guidance. Yeah,
and it sounds to me like it was such a foundation for the continued expansion that you have now. Just what a beautiful way to be
oh yeah,
fucking landed now and can build upon that. It's so amazing. I've been to many ayahuasca ceremonies to be able to hold space, to be in service, to you have to have a little of the medicine in you because that's the rule from the powers that be.
Yeah.
And I've done breath throughout the course, right, of people being in the medicine, out of the medicine, the morning after, et cetera. And then The most interesting thing that I've ever done in an ayahuasca community circle or ceremony is put people in ice baths between night 1 and night 2.
Wow.
So they're not in the medicine, but then there's this like interesting, especially if you're watching the ceremony, right? Because I'm a bit in the medicine. I've been in the medicine, and then I'm in service, so I'm like not quite in the deep dark night of the soul or wherever you go, right? Whether it's 12 hours of glory or 12 hours of darkness, and then just watching what happens, sort of with the flow of the energy in the room after everyone has, certainly there's one night of medicine together, right? That's going to do some of this like gelling people together. But then having everybody bear witness to each other, go through an ice bath, it's called a ritual or whatever you might, and that's in that space. There's oxytocin that's happening. There's the neurochemical cascade. There's the way that your body then shifts. And then night 2 feels almost like, if night 1 is like people trying to play music together with like wooden spoons and pots and pans, night 2 is like fucking Carnegie Hall. And it's not that it sounds beautiful necessarily, it's that everyone, as things are happening with people on opposite sides of the room, they're like almost interconnected. Like, oh, the violin section has got the drum section, has got the, and it's this really beautiful, interesting thing to have woven and experienced, right? And it's like, thank goodness for the person who was like, why don't you come and do ice baths in the middle of the ceremony? And can be, I think, just as pivotal. Like you said, you don't have to, no one, I don't believe everyone has to choose that as their source.
Yeah.
I also think that there's things as a person in the world of breath that I prefer. I say this sometimes, like Wachuma is this beautiful, right? Cactus and all that. And also those medicines have also, they're sneaky. Like I'm like, oh, Wachuma, it's easy. I can see the earth breathe. There's colors. It's amazing. And then there's like one ceremony I go to where it's almost like the medicine knows that I'm open and chilling, and they're like, oh, we're going to send you that message now. And I'm like, what's happening?
Here's something you've been carrying you didn't know about.
I know,
Boom,
totally.
and it just crushes you.
Yeah, totally.
You know what I loved when you're describing how you do the cold in between ceremonies? There's got to be some physiological goodness there too, because if you think about what's happening, all the blood is shunting to the internal organs. And so it's essentially squeezing potentially any medicinal residue that's in there.
Yeah.
So it's really like getting the cells ready for the next ceremony, but it's also getting out any energetics or any residue that maybe the person was still processing or carrying. I think that the ice bath is more than just a state changer. It's like squeezing a sponge in the sink.
Yeah.
You know, like a full sponge, and you squeeze it out. That's what's happening to our bodies when we're in there.
Yeah.
Especially if you do the mammalian dive reflex, you know, you get your head under there. It's like, whew, you're not thinking about anything else besides breathing.
Yeah. It's so much presence.
It's so much presence. So I think there's a lot going on physically, but also spiritually, psychosomatically, with like the squeezing of our organs from the blood rushing in there. And then when we get out, that's why we feel so good. The blood's coming back to our skin, and there's all the serotonin, dopamine dump and all that. I mean, it's really...
And it's amazing when you put the person who's like leading the ceremony in the ice bath as well. Like that's a really beautiful thing to be like, it's like an onerous thing, right? To be like, put the shaman or whatever we want to call the person who's doing it into the water, because there's probably a notion on their part, right? That they have to perform in some way. That's just got to exist, I would imagine. I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe they're feeling clean of that. And then also there's this like honor of being like almost like noble silence when they go in, even if I'm not asking for it per se.
Yes.
Where someone's, the audience, the group, the people that are there are just like, oh, this is someone who has served us all night long. Like we're going to just be quiet and hold space for this, and whatever comes out, comes out.
You know, there's another thing that for whatever reason I'm just thinking of right now. There's an author called Castaneda, and he has this phrase that's so profound. And he says, the goal of life, to actually live really well and to be vibrant and have vitality and enjoy your life experience, is to never let the old man in. Don't ever let the old man in, he writes, and do everything you can to not let the old man in. And I think that playing and singing and doing cold plunge and doing all these things that essentially cleanse us energetically, spiritually, physically, it's a way to not let the old man in. You know, so many people, they're in their later stage of life, and they actually died when they were 40 or 30 because they let the old man in. And I think the old man has many faces. He might have a face of resentment or doubt or self-pity or complacency or apathy is the worst, right? Apathy actually is resonating at 50. So it's shame, guilt, and then apathy. And apathy is like really, I think, how the old man gets in. And I think his metaphor and his teaching of the old man is essentially outsourcing your vitality to a belief that completely drains you, right? Like, don't let the old man in. Do the stuff that makes you have joy, and put yourself in challenging situations, just like you did when you were a kid and you learned how to climb a tree or rode a bike and you skinned your knee. Like, don't let the old man in. Because if you let the old man in, then you're actually going to die really young, and then you're going to live till you're old. And that's terrible.
These are the people who show up to me, and women more than men, because that's who I'm working with a bit more. But you don't see it as much in athletes, which is so beautiful, because they're hungry. They're like, typically if I'm working with someone at like a high level athlete, they're hungry for what's next, and they take criticism so well. Like, it's just like fail faster. They're like, okay, got it. What's next? And I love that in some ways. It's not to say all humans can't do that, but it's just sort of this interesting notion of the way that people like lean in. And also, while we're having these conversations, what I also think is beautiful for anyone who's listening is I'm hoping that all this conversation is the reminder, not only that Josh and I are navigating these things every single day in our lives, like the highs and lows, because we certainly are, but also that like you're not alone. That's, I don't know why it took me so long to figure that out, but just that so many people are going through this piece of, how do I shift my state? How do I feel better? Where's my self-worth? Vulnerability feels scary. Whatever it is, it's heartbreak, it's loss, it's grief. Like, there's so many people going out there. And I think in some ways, until even like Mark's program, getting in and listening to him speak, and he's a firecracker around like, understanding yourself and knowing what you deserve and all of those things. I think like that really sort of leveled up the playing field for me to even say, okay, there's 152 people on this phone call that he just posted about happening an hour ago, right? Right? So then we can shift ourselves in the collective. Yeah, that feels so important.
Well, yeah, it's just, isn't it really a permission slip? Like, I don't feel in any way that just because we get to do this that we're better, or it's just fun, it's enjoyable.
Part of the play.
It's part of the play, but we're not, we're still included in the struggle as everyone else. It's just that we're choosing to talk about it.
Yeah.
So that's the only differentiating factor, is like, we're going through our own journey with our own hardships, just like everybody else. Yet I think the antidote to the poison is actually sharing it. That's where everything,
put that on a t-shirt.
That's where everything goes away, as far as like the pain and the shame and the grief and the apathy. And that's why the scale exists, right? The scale exists because our job is to elevate ourselves through it. Our job is to work ourselves through the scale, moment, hour, day by day, month by month, year by year, to continually work the scale.
Yeah.
Because God Creator is going to bring us challenges that are going to knock us down to 50 or 20 even. Like, I don't know if you've ever felt shame in your life. Maybe not.
I mean, come on.
Okay. So shame resonates at 20. And so if we're spending a life in shame, feeling like we're never good enough, the moment we talk about it, we immediately go up the scale just by speaking about it. Isn't that wild?
Yeah.
It's like the antidote to shame is sharing. The antidote to depression is expression. The antidote to any of the lower frequencies is actually being vulnerable to share that you are working on going to the higher frequency. And then paradoxically, that gets you to the higher frequency just by sharing it.
Yeah.
And we complicate the shit out of it.
Yeah.
And
or we don't want to say it, or we're like, I'm 35 years old. It's all downhill from here. And you're like, wait, what? Hold on.
Oh, that's actually a really big one. Don't you feel like that's a cultural thing?
Yeah, this is when you were talking about like don't let the old man in.
Don't let the old man in.
A woman came to me, and so I was saying when I went on the tangent about athletes, like the woman came to me and she's 35 and she's like, well, I just turned 35. I think it's all downhill from here. And I thought, well, I must really be fucked.
That is a terrible statement.
Yeah, because we know how much can happen.
Yeah. Well, maybe when she says it's all down here, it was told to her by somebody that she loved. Yeah. And so she believed it.
Or just the health space is an interesting piece. Like you have the 5 points paragon.
Yes.
Yeah.
The Pentagon.
The Pentagon.
Yeah.
Pentagon.
Yeah.
And that feels like it's a very governmental word. I like it. But just knowing not everybody is familiar with that health and wellness piece, right? Like that physical fitness or the emotional well-being. I think not everybody's just, we don't know what we don't know until we know it, right?
Yep.
It's part of the process of learning. And so shifting that to say, okay, how can I take this in? Who told me this in the first place? Or I just feel icky, or I can't sleep.
Yeah.
Maybe this is just what aging is. Somewhere we had to have heard that for somebody to say, at this age, it's over now.
Yeah, that's actually some really disempowering nomenclature that I've heard before. Over the hill gang. It's like, what are you talking about? What hill, what imaginary hill have you programmed into your video game that makes you feel like shit? And if so, if you know you feel like shit, why do you keep saying it? But this goes back to the BTFA, right? These beliefs that are installed by school. I think school is probably one of the worst installation mechanisms. And then even more so our parents, who they're giving us what was installed in them. And we didn't ask for it, right? We don't need it. It doesn't serve us. But they think that's just how it is. Yeah, it's all downhill from here, over the hill gang, second half of my life, blah, blah, blah. That's why people get to 40, 50 and they have a midlife crisis. It's actually a self-fabricated crisis. There is no crisis. They just think there's a crisis. Yesterday, I interviewed this woman on Lore, and she wrote a book called Tiny Experiments. And she talked about these cognitive biases that we have. She calls them unconscious scripts. And one of the scripts that we have is a script that's a people-pleasing script, an epic script, and then there's one more. But essentially, it's all these scripts that are based on shame or what we think we should do or what we've heard that we think we should do. And it's all just programming. It's really easy for me to sit here and tell you that, because I think all of us can feel and know that on some level. Like, yeah, Josh, we get it. It's all just programming. Okay. But then what do you do with the programming? There's this amazing space between knowing and doing. Just because I know something doesn't mean I'm going to do or behave differently. I actually have to unpack why I think it's real, why I know it, and then install something new in its place. That's how an identity shift happens. Everybody wants to go from A to B, or go from, overweight to fit, or go from, a subpar athlete to a great athlete. Everybody wants to go through an identity shift. But the part that I don't think really anybody's talking about, I mean, I know you talk about it, is if we're going to let go of something that's been holding us back, what are we going to put in its place? And I think we're so focused on just removing the thing that we think is harmful that we don't put any energy or any attention into what's the amazing thing that we're going to install. And that's why in personal development, in so many veins, whether it's Bob Proctor or Wallace Wattles or Napoleon Hill or anybody, Neville Goddard, they all say that, the imagination and actually knowing the outcome, and in NLP, they talk about knowing your outcome, start with the end in mind. Who cares if you have the belief? Just, okay, I have the belief. Now let me focus all of my energy on the outcome that I desire. And then naturally, I'm going to replace that old belief with the end result that I'm working on. And by the way, in the middle, our shit's going to come up. We're going to meet ourselves in the process. That's the whole journey.
And unpacking that. We unpack that through that thing instead of like that spiritual bypassing thing. That's just like, I'm not going to do that anymore. But then you're right, there's this hole. And then what are you filling it with? More of the gunk, less integration, less transfer of the end game that you're working on.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm doing maybe a poor job of explaining is this, like, we get what we focus on. It's such a fucking platitude, isn't it? You get what you focus on. Love is all there is. Like, we hear these platitudes so much that we just forget that they're so real. It's like the emperor's not wearing clothes. Yeah. It's like, yeah, he's naked. But really what it is if you just focus on removing the thing that's causing you pain,
then you're focused as hell.
Then you're just focused on that. I don't know if you know him, Paul Chek. Have you heard of his work? Or have you interviewed him?
Yeah, I haven't interviewed him.
Y'all should meet.
Yeah, I want to.
You would gel. He a couple months ago was giving a talk, and he said, what happens if you're standing at the Grand Canyon and you shout out to the Grand Canyon, I want to lose 40 pounds. What comes back to you? It's just, I want to lose 40 pounds. But what happens if you stand at the Grand Canyon and you say, I love myself. I love myself. I'm worthy of this goal that I have in mind, and I have achieved this goal, and this is exactly the person that I've become. I love myself. That's exactly what comes back to you. So if we sit at the Grand Canyon and we say, I'm working on letting go of this thing. I really hate that this thing is here. That's all the universe hears. That's all God hears, is just the thing that we don't want. And you can ask many people, how do you want your life to be? And they'll all of a sudden tell you all the things they don't want. Then they're not even clear about what they want. They're not even clear about where they're going. So there's no spaciousness for them to actually take their outcome and insert it in the disempowering belief. It doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So I hope that was more clear, because like there's a lot of people that talk about it. And I think what they're all saying is know your outcome, know where you're going, get clear on what you want, and then make that the fuel source for getting there, instead of focusing on deleting the thing that's causing you pain and getting stuck in that whole vice. It's really just a trap. It's a total trap.
Yeah.
It's a trap in the game.
Yeah. And I love that you just reinterpreted yourself in that piece, because mostly that was like a beautiful message to deliver to me. That was a reminder.
Me too.
Yeah. Just a beautiful message.
Me too.
And I think then there's some kind of nervous system thing that exists within that is Matt Vincent just came up to. He's the Not Dead Yet guy. So
Oh yeah, I know him.
Yeah. So he just came up and spoke at the retreat I led, and he talked a lot about, you better check in with your nervous system. You got to check in and understand, like, is this discomfort or is this danger? Because we're all treating it like it's danger, but actually it's just discomfort. And so how do we stay in a place where it's like, it's uncomfortable and can be scary, right? What do we fear more, success or failure? It can be scary to say, this is where I'm at, and focus on the future. And then also just be in that as, this is how I'm going to future cast for myself, right?
Future cast. I enjoy that.
Yeah. Future casting
cast.
it. So I think that nervous system tone, coupled with everything you just said, is really such a beautiful, important message.
Yeah, it's medicine for me.
Yeah.
It's actually the easiest thing. You know, we interview a lot of people, and I'm sure that everybody out there, this isn't your first podcast that you've heard.
Yeah,
right?
I imagine at this point, no.
Yeah, you've probably heard a lot. So then what are you really seeking? What are you really seeking? You're just seeking the stuff that you already know. You're actually just listening to podcasts to remember stuff that you already know. And that's the ultimate paradox of all of this, is all change is super counterintuitive when you first do it. Super counterintuitive. It's very counterintuitive to go in ice. Very counterintuitive. There are still some days where I'm like, I look at it and then I go clean the gym, or, I'll like not do it. It's such a mental thing. It's such a, like, why am I cleaning the gym? Just get in the ice bath. Just do it.
But what if you were the guy that never hesitated? Like, just what if? What would that feel like if you were like, I feel like I could be the guy who doesn't hesitate and I'm in?
Absolutely.
Like that's such an interesting, because I found with my practice, and again, I know I do it all the time and all that. I just decided in the moment that I was at Laird and Gabby's, I don't know if we talked about this on your podcast, but I just decided, mostly from ego, a little bit from ego, because I had all these professional surfers and athletes around me, and I couldn't hold my own with them, with all the weights in the bottom of the pool.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, well, the only place I'm going to be able to hold my own is like if I get in the ice bath like a Zen master. And I decided, like, one of the biggest life lessons that I've ever gotten was the approach is everything. Like, it sounds so simple, or maybe it sounds like something we've said before, but you watch someone go to do an Olympic lifting match or whatever, and you can kind of see how the lift's going to go and the way they walk up to the bar. It's just the approach is everything. And so I feel like that for me in cold, I say this to you not to like coach you through it. You know what you're doing. It's just, what about that notion that like you could just be the person who's like, I'm going to approach it and do it. And of course there's like, it no longer exists in my body, quite frankly. I had one moment on the retreat because we pulled 36 inches of ice out of the ice. Like, it was 36 inches of ice deep. We had to like chainsaw it and ice saw it and get crazy.
Damn.
So I had one moment of being like, that's going to be intense when I get in there. Okay, but that's a rare moment for me because I've spent so much time in so many different low temp, moving water, etc.
Yeah.
But that's always to me like how do I, like, this is when I sit here and I listen to all the beautiful things that you've shared with us the whole show today. And I think the parallel for me is I have absolutely nailed that with cold in the short amount of time, to not hold on to the holy shit, I don't know, it's going to be okay, I'm going to go clean the house. Like, I finally have. It doesn't make me the better version of anyone cold plunging. And like I say all the time, as it goes in the ice, it goes in life. And I just haven't quite grokked fully how to get over the hump of that mental, emotional thing where I'm like, it's not going to be okay. I'm going to hold on to a little shame. I'm going to go clean the house, metaphorically, right? I'm going to go clean the house before I talk about the thing that I want to become, or say I'm the thing that I am becoming, as opposed to holding the reins of the stuff that's holding me back. That white knuckling capacity.
That's so beautiful. You know what the biggest lie in health and wellness really is?
Tell me.
Is that the person who's teaching has it all figured out. That is the ultimate lie. And anytime I ever am listening to someone or I'm absorbing wisdom from someone and they say nothing about their personal life, nothing about what they're struggling with, nothing, not even a shred of vulnerability. Some of the biggest people in wellness are like this. I'm not going to name names, but they don't ever share their own stuff, ever, ever, ever. And it brings this illusionary falsehood that they do have it all wired and they do have it all figured out, but it's actually just a mask that they're wearing. It's a mask that they're wearing to convince people that they should listen to them, buy their thing, and do what they're saying. But what they don't realize, and this is the biggest lie in health and wellness, is if they would just share where they really are, then they would allow everyone that's listening to them to do the same. Because all those leaders are doing is just teaching their students to be leaders like them, to be leaders that don't share their stuff, to be leaders that don't have vulnerability. And I'm not saying you need to go up and talk about your addiction and you don't have to go so deep, but like be a human, share your teaching, share your framework, be a professional, go for it, for sure. And be humble. I think the humility aspect is missing from a lot of professionals where they're speaking from a pulpit. They're speaking to the people instead of from the people. We need to speak from the people. No matter, when I'm in my 60s and God willing, hopefully I have really deep mastery at that point. I'm sure that I will always remember all of my struggles and I will always share all of those. And I will also share the struggles that I'm having then, because that's trustable. And then the people that are having those struggles are going to be like, oh, they're going to exhale. Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. Wow, I really want to learn from you now.
Yeah.
I didn't want to learn from that other version that had it all figured out and that was super tight and polished and everything was all buttoned up. That person didn't resonate with me. But this one does.
Yeah.
Because they have for lack of a better term, balls or courage to share their things. That's why I really believe, and this is something I'm embodying now, is that for many years I would just shine a light on everybody. I would just be like, I'm a personal trainer. I'm here to serve you. I'm here to help you. But when I was shining the flashlight, the space between my hand and my stomach stayed dark. All my stuff stayed dark. All my addiction, all my things, nothing ever got flushed out. So this past year, I was like, we really actually just need to hold up a lantern from now on. Like a real leader holds a lantern, because when I hold up a lantern, I'm shining light on me. I'm filling the space with light so that we're all learning together. We're actually all in it together, instead of me, the leader, quote, quote, just shining light on you and I'm here to shine light on you. This is what spiritual narcissism is built on. Yeah. This is what much of Instagram is built on. So be careful, y'all. If you're learning from somebody and they're just shining a light on you, like, check yourself and go to a leader who's holding a lantern instead.
Yeah. And you so do that, and it's like the person who's actually holding the lantern, because other people can't hold the lantern until they see you doing it. So
they hold the lantern, then their sister or their mom is like, oh, that's so amazing. That's so real. Oh, my daughter or my son is like being honest. Don't we all just want honesty, don't we?
Yeah.
Oh, it's like the more secrets we have, the freaking less liberated we are. We hold all these secrets in and we wonder why we don't feel free. It's because we're holding on to all these secrets. I'm not saying we need to spill our guts on social media every day, but go to safe spaces where you can share your secrets so that they don't hold you hostage anymore. And then once you're through the journey, then share how you got through it.
Yeah.
And share what you went through.
Yeah.
That's the map. That's the whole point of being a leader, I think.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's really missing in all verticals of business, but especially in personal development, health and wellness, because there's this almost like a hologram of what we expect, and we have these leaders that insert themselves in that hologram and they're speaking like this from a pulpit, when really they just need to get down on their knees and get in the cold and get dirty and roll around with everybody else.
Yeah. Yeah. So beautifully put. I want you to just share what's lighting you up right now, what's coming, how can people find you, support all of your work? I mean, number one, they have to listen to your show. It's just impeccably done. And I've come to you 2 or 3 times, not to gush over you, and said, I love the way you're doing your openers. I'm totally ripping it off. Thank you so much.
All wisdom is borrowed.
But it's great. Now people could, when you heard the opener to the show of all the pull quotes from you, and I'm like, came right out of your model. So I love it. But where and how can people support you, find you, work with you, get more of this wisdom and wellness into their life?
What is really lighting me up is the very thing that I'm still struggling with, and that is this understanding of emotional epigenetics. You know, how to truly live free of concern from our harmful psychosomatic conditions of our lineage, how to not be in genetic determinism, essentially. I'm really passionate about that. I think I could do that for the rest of my life. I'm starting to feel that now.
Awesome.
I'm really starting to feel that that could be what I study and what I do till I leave the planet, is understanding emotional epigenetics. And so in the Liberated Life tribe, in the community that is launching here probably in about 2 months, let's just say less than 2 months, okay?
Yeah.
Speaking with the end in mind, know your outcome. So by the time this episode comes out, the tribe will be live, and it's a place where we can have these conversations. There's no judgment. There's no apathy. There's no projections of falsehood. It's just meeting people where they are. And so I think the only way we can be liberated is in community. That's why you have your retreats. That's why we do everything in person. Like, the best things happen in person. And so the way that we get people to come in person is by meeting them where they are, which is online, because we're all online, right? So liberatedlife.com is where people can go. That's where the emotional epigenetics framework will be taught. That's where the wellness pentagon framework will be taught. Authentic abundance will be taught there. And it's just a space where people can exhale and start learning about themselves, so they can actually not have the BTFA loop run their life, and they can really feel like they have some agency and some power in the decisions they make. And it's the very thing I'm learning in my life right now. So it's fascinating. All these concepts, I think, are coagulating into this understanding that we all want freedom, and freedom is really just peace. We all just want peace. And I think that's where real power comes from, is from peace. And I've lived its opposite for so long. You know, I changed the podcast name. I've been through a lot to get here, and I'm like, okay, we actually all just want to feel free. We all just want to have peace. Like, that's that's really what we want. So that's at liberatedlife.com. And then the podcast is called Wellness and Wisdom.
Yeah, so awesome. And it just sounds to me like that's a sort of portal for change, where, like, a gathering space for people to work on their shit together. And I think that's where there's lots of times that I'm working on my shit because I know that there's someone on the other side working on their shit too. Yeah. And so I really just commend you for putting together something like that, because it's the space where we all say, okay, it's Thursday, I need to do the thing and not procrastinate out of this or think I'm on my own with this. And there's other connections. And I think we learn a lot too from watching other people go through transformation, right? Like, there's something on the other side. Amazing. So what a beautiful community you're putting together.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You know, it's been one of the roadblocks along the way is I had this thought, BTFA, that was connected to a belief that the space is crowded. There's so many communities, blah, 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 blah. But then I flew on an airplane one day, and I was coming into Austin, and I was looking down, and I'm like, there's millions of houses down here. This is just one city. There's millions of cities. Oh my God, there's no such thing as crowded. There's no such thing as scarcity. It doesn't exist. It was just taught to me by people that were afraid to do what they wanted to do. It has no bearing on my life. And so, that was one thing that's why it's taken so long, because I wanted to pour so much into it, and I wanted it to be perfect. And no, that's not what people need. People don't need perfect. People need done. Right?
People need their, like, holding hands. And I don't mean you holding your hand because they have to have their hand held, but like, people need to be like, hey, this is collective. We're doing it together, and someone needs to hold the lantern. And that's what you're doing. And I also would argue that it's in its perfect time. It's all perfect time. Because there's so much of the information from the podcast and things you've worked on and all the places you've traveled and people the past versions of you and the dad and the lover and the friend and all of those things that now you're so well seated to just be someone who can guide people through that. Like, even just sitting with you, it's a bit of the philosopher's stone, like there's like, you're like, here's this person and here's this person. And sure shoot. And I go back to this podcast and say, here's 6 names that I know that you're very well studied upon, that I would behoove me to go and study deeper into these books and authors and philosophers. So it's so, I'll be there as soon as it launches. Of course.
Hey, you're so welcome. Yeah. And look, all of our communities must communitize with each other. Like, that's the whole thing. There's this like weird, I don't know if it comes from Silicon Valley, where it's like, the stonewalling of data. It's like, my platform's here, your platform's there. I think AI is just going to explode all of this.
Yeah.
And we're just going to have one big organism with many faces and all like Sherpa, Breath and Cold, and Well Power Podcast and all the other million podcasts that are out there. Like, people forget there are billions of people in the world with a B, and mostly all of these people, well, not all of them, but the majority of them have access to the internet, right? I don't know what the exact numbers are. So anytime, like, if you're listening and you're like, I want to do something, just fucking do it. Just fucking do it. Any of the stories or any of the things that are coming up that make you not want to do it, there's somebody waiting for your gift. There's somebody waiting for what it is you have to share in the exact perfect way you have to share it. Don't rob them of that gift. I'm not here to shame anyone, but the story that it's not the right time or it needs to be perfect, it's actually all a lie. And the only way people are going to trust anyone is if they just go for it and then learn in public.
Yeah.
That's the only way that people trust anyone anyways.
Yeah. Hallelujah. Let that be your mantra.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sitting with me.
Hey, thank you for being here. I just want to commend you. Like, what a great space you hold. I've shared many things in ways I've never shared before. And that's the mark of a great podcast conversation. That's what really a podcast is. It's a true conversation. It's not just a checklist of all the biohacks and a checklist of all the things. Like, this is what people want.
Thank you.
So hopefully this gives people permission to have this in their life.
Yeah. And to lean in.
Yeah.
Love it. Thanks.
You're welcome.